Hi, welcome to Asset Creatives Room with your host, Danny Richardson.
Hi Christian, how you doing?
I'm very good, Danny. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thank you for coming on my podcast.
Thank you for having me. I've been excited about this, and it's such a long time since we've spoken. So
I know. To be
really
honest with you,
appreciate it.
I've been a bit slack with it. If I'm being honest, life's got in the way. It's been a bit of a weird, funny year, as I'm sure you know. So I'm gonna continue and plow on through, and I'm really excited to speak to you and hear about the kind of stuff you're doing.
Oh, thank you, mate. And I'm excited to talk to you, and I love your background as well. I wasn't expecting you beat my background hands down.
I like the. Is it a Buddha in the background there you've got?
It is. That's our Gautama Siddhartha. Yeah, Buddha.
Okay,
You spotted him.
We're going to definitely speak about that kind of stuff, and it's an area that I've got interest. If you'd have asked me a couple of years ago, I probably wouldn't have shown any interest whatsoever. But I've definitely kind of it's piquing an interest. I'm coming round to certain ideas about it, so I look forward to hearing where you're taking it and what you're doing with it, and especially some of the terms and stuff. I have a brief kind of idea of what I'm talking about, but there's some interesting concepts, some interesting ideas, and so I look forward to hopefully you educating me a little bit about some of that stuff.
Or rather maybe re-educating, all of these things that I talk about through, and we'll talk about My Mindful Guru, the service that I have, but all of these things that I talk about are things that you already know on the deepest level, your deeper intelligence that you have, which is beyond logic. So whenever I talk or whenever I post things and teach the mindfulness, teach the Zen, teach the consciousness, people will always say, oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, well, I know that. I know that intellectually. And it's the jump, taking it from intellectual to experiential. Yeah. That is the crux of it. And it can take many years to get to that point where people say, oh, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I totally get it. I understand what you're saying about happiness and material wealth and that happiness comes from within. But then, of course, it gets to Monday morning and they're like, oh, I hate Mondays. Or like it gets to Friday and they're like, oh, yeah, it's Friday. I'm so happy now. And the living of the life is not in alignment with the inner knowing. So this is...
No, I definitely agree with you. I think there's like a fundamental truth to a lot of the kind of mindfulness stuff, which I think living in the Western world, we can sometimes forget the simplistic nature and of those things, and we get so consumed, like you're saying, in the material side of things. But before we kind of dive deep into this, because I'm sure we will, and I'm looking forward to that, I generally start by asking people to give me like a 20-second brief introduction of yourself. So I don't know if you've prepared a little something along those lines. If you could fire away, if you have.
Yeah, of course. Well, I know me quite well, so this is easy for me. So the most interesting thing for people at the moment that I'm doing is I have a website called mymindfulguru.com, and for some years now, I've offered one-to-one and group teachings, which used to be mostly in person, but now because of the COVID situation, I'm at 6 o'clock I'm teaching someone in New Zealand, and at 9 o'clock I'm teaching someone in St. Juan. So I'm teaching mindfulness through video chat and in person where possible. This is something that has come about naturally and organically, just through spiritual practices. I don't like the word spiritual because it has a different meaning in everyone's mind, but through meditative and yoga practices, I was lucky enough to experience what I suppose people sometimes call an awakening, or a conscious awakening, or an awareness awakening. And I became liberated of stress, worry, concern, anxiety, depression.
You look happy.
I feel it.
Good.
And the happiness which comes from inside. So I guess going off on a tangent here, but I guess I'm Christian, and I have a service which I'm offering to the world, which I feel compelled to do, which is about teaching people how to rediscover their true internal aware self, which isn't ever negatively affected or perturbed by this external three-dimensional world that we live in.
Right. Well, that's a pretty solid answer, I think. And when you said you're Christian, that's as in your name rather than your religious
yes,
leanings.
Right.
Just to clarify.
That is important, Danny. Yeah, that is important, because religion is very, very different from spirituality. So religion is obviously predicated on the idea of belief and doctrine, whereas spirituality is the absence of belief and doctrine. So it's interacting with life as it is. And being sensitive to life as it is, rather than applying fixed rules, which there are so many grey areas in life. And if I lived by the doctrine of you don't lie, for example,
we'd all be screwed.
We'd all be screwed. But I read the example someone once gave of Anne Frank and the people who were concealing Anne Frank, and when the Nazis came and they're saying, "Oh, is there anyone in the house?" The right thing to do in that moment is say, "No, mate, there's no one in this house." So if we say you shouldn't lie as a blanket rule, and many religions have these laws, when really the right thing to do in some moments is lie to protect people and be compassionate. So spirituality is the absence of belief, because belief is, of course, an opinion in the absence of experiential evidence. And belief is what causes all of the world's conflict, interpersonal issues and things.
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm attracted to Buddhism. Is it's that there's no, like you say, there's no real doctrine as such. There's nothing. You're not being told what to do or what to think. It's questions, asking questions. And, I like that. I'm drawn to that. So I generally kind of, again, after having just introduced yourself, I don't know how far back you want to go, but so you mentioned actually a little bit before, so a couple of years ago you had some kind of what you might describe as an awakening. But going back even earlier, perhaps, is when you were growing up, or as you were, at what point in your life did you realize there's I guess a deeper meaning to all this? And I mean, I know you're artistically inclined as well, and there's a few strings to your bow. You're a really talented musician, and so just
thank you.
Were you always drawn to another way, I guess, as opposed to, because whether it's the music side of stuff or the spirituality side of things, it's off the beaten path, perhaps, compared to what you might associate with modern Western living, if you like. Yeah. Well, for me, I distinctly remember feeling very, very different from everyone else at school. And I remember I never spoke to anyone about it, but when I was in bed at night as a child, and when I say child, I'm probably thinking like 9 years old. That's as far back as I can remember doing this. I would move energy around my body as though it was as normal as breathing or eating. So I would lie in bed and I could move what I now understand to be, some people call it chi energy, the energy that moves through the body, which science has now finally caught up with and gone, oh yeah, it exists, through the meridian points of the body. So I would lie in bed and I could feel an overwhelming sensation of energy that I could move, particularly in my hands and feet, and then up my spine and into the base of my skull. And could you describe what that feels like, just to give people an idea of what you mean?
So it kind of, at the time, I remember I would tell my dad about it, and I would say, I think I can direct my blood. Okay. So it was a very warm feeling of what felt like warmth, blood. Right. Warmth and tingling. Mm-hmm. And I could direct that all around my body, and certainly a tingling like almost an warm electrical tingling up and down my spine. So
Yeah.
so it was kind of like a up down situation, and like I was drawing in and pulling up an energy from the earth and from God knows where at the time. And no one, you know, you tell people in your close family, and people are like, okay, this
You're mad.
you're mad. Yeah, that's peculiar. That is Christian. And nothing, no one really, we didn't discuss it in any further. So that was, and that's something I still do to this day, that was a form of energy meditation, moving my what I now understand to be, you know, the 114 chakras, which are in the body, 2 outside the body. I've since learned, and I understand what it was that I was innately doing back then.
Okay.
But at school, I always remember feeling, having an innate knowing, like, hang on, this isn't right. You know, teachers shouting at children, pay attention.
You will
but
learn.
Right, exactly. But never really teaching children how to pay attention.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of unpleasantness, unkindness, bullying, and cruelty, which I found very difficult to understand as a child. And I was kind of ostracized. I didn't really have lots of friends, or I wasn't in a friendship group. And it was, you know, it was a sense of, because I didn't adopt one of the identities, which everyone does, by the way, at school.
Yeah,
and then later in life, the identity becomes the doctor, the this, these make-believe things. And people live their life through that character. I never adopted a character until maybe a little bit later on at a sort of 17, wherein the character was probably more musician or rock star at that age. Rock god. So I wasn't a sporting type, although I did sports, and I wasn't an academic type, although I was quite academic. I didn't fit into the molds, like, you know, lots of people feel this way, but certainly I felt like the schooling system was a failure because it wasn't teaching kindness and compassion, which is the only thing the earth really needs right now. It would have been nice had it have done that. It doesn't. It was teaching competitiveness, ego, the thinking mind, and identification with the thinking mind. So now when I meet my peers from school, you know, you bump into people living in the small place like where we live. And I see characters. I see the playing of a role through the mind.
Facades and masks.
And personas, exactly. Like what Carl Jung would talk about, the persona, right. And I very seldom meet someone who has any level of inner engineering that has been gifted to them, as in how to get there. I meet people who want to know, what do you do? You know, what, rather than how's things, and you know, what, there's certainly an interest
what's going on like below surface level, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, exactly. How, you know, and so when people ask me what I do, I'm just enjoying, I'm blissed out, and I'm enjoying the journey, in each moment of the journey. And I won't necessarily go into detail about, you know, job roles and things like this, because then you start defining yourself in that person's mind. So, so the journey for me it's always been there, but I repressed that in order not to seem so weird in this culture. And then at university studying psychology, the mindful thing came out in a bigger way, because I realized, wow, it's approved by the National Institute for Clinical Excellence as a form of therapy. So once I left university, I could teach it working in the NHS. So I was like, okay, maybe this is my thing. Maybe teaching mindfulness, and I can have this spiritual angle to it. That turned out not to be the case. It's very prescribed, and the type of mindfulness taught in, at least back in, what was this, say 2013 perhaps, it was very science-based. And when you approach this topic from a logical point of view, you will miss the whole point. You miss the whole thing. So I was working with psychologists who were still feeling nervous about teaching a group, still having thoughts which would create a negative internal state. and I was struggling to understand how they couldn't understand. So it was very it was, for me, it was like Nietzsche's bloodless scholars. You know, it was like they're teaching mindfulness, but I could sense that there was no real understanding of what it was.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm definitely not anti-science. So in fact, I think when I started my photography journey, and I've sat there editing on my laptop, I'd often be listening to podcasts or YouTube, and it was very heavily science-based initially in the first couple of years, but then I've since slowly kind of moving my way towards the more spiritual side of things. And yeah, it's interesting. I guess things that can't, science wants to measure stuff, doesn't it? And it's not necessarily easy to measure the type of thing that you're talking about. Perhaps you could see
exactly.
It's weird. You can see it, but you can't necessarily measure it, if that makes sense.
This is exactly it. You know, this is the
or feel it. Sorry, not necessarily see it. Feel it, perhaps, is what.
Yeah. But you can see it too, but you see it in a different way. But certainly you feel it. This is purely experiential. You know, words are really, like Eckhart Tolle says, words are just the stepping stones. You know,
I love his voice.
Yeah, he's soothing.
Great voice. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, he's certainly still, and certainly experiencing that stillness within, which, like you say, can't necessarily be measured. Although, you know, quantum physics can measure the quantum hologram, the ether, the thing that's there that they used to call the ether, but we're not quite sure what it is. But there's now experiments which have shown through the reflection of light, they've shown that there is some sort of network that is there, that we just don't have the instruments available to measure it. You know, it's like 100 years ago.
Perhaps dark matter and dark energy is like a similar-ish type of thing where we don't really know what it is,
right? Because
again, we don't have the tools to measure those things.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, like 100 years ago, if someone had talked about infrared, or certain parts of the light spectrum, ultraviolet, people would have said, you're crazy, what are you talking about? But it's only because we have the instruments to be able to perceive these things that we then believe them. Whereas this doesn't require any belief, because you can just experience it. You know, obviously you have to try to experience it, you have to apply yourself to it. But yeah, there's certainly in our culture there is a tendency to lean towards the scientific, and if I can't measure it or observe it and quantify it, then it doesn't exist.
There's anecdotal evidence is not a thing really in science, is it?
It's not, and this thing transcends science, because science is wonderful and it's brought us fantastic things. I mean, penicillin, like the way we've been able to travel, and whether there's good and bad sides to this, but the logical thinking mind is wonderful when it's directed and orchestrated in a positive way, and it's not damaging you. But humans who also don't have a spiritual angle to existence, and by spiritual I just mean understanding the true nature of what you are, a conscious, aware, present entity in this world, in order to be able to have this still calmness. If you're only in the cold, clinical, logical side, you are missing so much beauty. I mean, if you tried to apply logic to love, like a relationship, it would seem so illogical. Yeah, it would be like, what? Why are you with this person? You're not getting any more money. You're losing money, or you're not overall. This is not a success. But love is not something that can be quantified in a relationship. And there's a sweetness to humans which is buried under that calculated, logical mind. And it's an intelligence which is far beyond the intellect beings, the science and the thinking. The intellect is so useful, but the deep intelligence which is there, which doesn't require thought, but just has this inner knowing, this knowing of right from wrong, without having to rely on being told.
Or having doctrines, like you said, the religious side of things, perhaps, or
or
it's really interesting. It seems to be from the, again, I don't profess to be any kind of an expert. That's why I'm speaking to you.
Me either.
Well, we're all learning, aren't we? But it seems to be that the Eastern philosophies, they seem to have their head around the spiritual side of things far better than the Western world. We're talking about the material aspects and the way we live our lives in the Western world. Why do you think that is?
It's a good question. So much of the of course, the Zen is Eastern, and so much of the yogic philosophy is Indian, coming from the rishis, and the rishis you had the 7 rishis who laid down all of this understanding of the yogic technology, the yogic sciences. So this part of the world that we're in doesn't have such a rich history of spiritual teachings, and it was only because we had Christianity here, which kind of took away any internal knowing and applied belief, applied doctrine. And it was only the Knights Templar who were kind of a branch of Christianity, who were kind of went off to India and different parts of the world and were subject to these different teachings, and they were like, wow, this is far beyond anything that we've ever come across. So they had to keep it very, very secret, and they had to have their spiritual practices in secret. They weren't able to openly discuss it because they would have been, with the Inquisition, they would have been killed. Mm. So, religion was so overbearingly pushed. I mean, you only have to walk around in our culture in the town center and see how many churches there are. I mean, it's Christianity really has left a mark. And being the main religion, which is based on belief and doctrine, it doesn't leave much room, particularly if someone says, you believe this or we're going to kill you.
There's not much room there, is there?
There's not much room for maneuver, is there? So it seems that the other parts of the world had more spiritual freedom. And now the West kind of now has that spiritual freedom, but it sort of feels like it's only just catching up. People will say, wow, Eckhart Tolle or Alan Watts, and and these are only
we're going to speak about Alan Watts for sure, because I know he's someone who both of us are very interested in, so I look forward
absolutely to that. And he's not long past. You're looking at 60s and 70s, so and of course, being subjugated by belief and doctrine, the spiritual element, things like the psychedelic movement in the 60s had a huge catalyst for awakening, because LSD, but mostly the plant medicines like psilocybin mushrooms, these things will, whether you like it or not, they will rip the ghost out of the machine. They will
tear down the structure pretty much and unveil what's behind the curtain almost.
Exactly. And certainly for me, I was lucky enough to go to the Amazon jungle.
Have you? And you've done ayahuasca?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that really intrigues me actually. What was that like?
Well, people would. I'd only ever spoken about it, and I never imagined I would get the opportunity to go. And then within the space of a few weeks, the opportunity came up. So I was like, what do I need to I better get what shoes do you wear in the jungle? And I better get a bag, and trying to pull everything together. So it was quite quickly that we went there, and I went with a good friend of mine who has had over 60 ayahuasca ceremonies. So it was nice to be there with him. It's that just being in the jungle anyway is very difficult. It's very hot. I mean, you get eaten alive. Well, certainly the time of year that we went, the mosquitoes were just everywhere. I mean, it was my back just looked like it had been a pincushion. I mean, it was just beyond anything I've ever experienced. I must have had 1,000 mosquito bites. Must have been some sort of jungle record. And so it was the jungle is stunning, and the place that we went to is located on a boiling river. So there's a river that runs through this settlement, which is actually 100 degrees Celsius. It's actually boiling because of fissures in the earth. Okay. So it's steam coming off. So you approach the settlement, and you have to cross the boiling river over these stepping stones. And it's quite a breathtaking.
Welcome to the jungle.
Welcome to the jungle, yeah, because there's, you've been on the Land Rover, the roads disappear, and you travel for a long time, and then you get in the boats and down the tributaries, and then there's the trek through the jungle, and it's quite it's quite overwhelming. And crossing the boiling river into the settlement to meet the shaman is it's something that you never forget, and you can feel the healing happening at a cellular level in the body just when you set foot in the jungle, surrounded by the trees and the animals, and
I get that sense just walking, even like in the woods over here.
Yes.
There's a connection to that, and even I've taken up sea swimming recently, so there's like a rawness about putting yourself out there in nature, and I guess being in a jungle surrounded by whatever you were surrounded by in terms of the animals and creepy crawlies there would have
yeah. There's a lot of cockroaches there's sort of this size.
Really?
Cockroaches in the bed. Yeah, I had lots of cockroaches in my bed. I'm not getting much sleep because they're so loud.
Yeah. And
the smell. So I had a real cockroach problem in my sleeping quarters. But I too do the sea swimming for the cold shock. I do it wetsuit and without the wetsuit. Yeah. And there's a connection to the energy that is the earth, that it's this thing, isn't it, that you can't explain with words. You just have to do it to understand its significance for your health and well-being. And it's no different to going in the woods here or being in the Amazon jungle. The plants have a consciousness and have an energy. They have a vibration. And when we are close to them, we feel better. And people don't know why they feel better, but there's something about being in nature. And scientists have shown that plants actually will give off a kind of pheromone that will actually lower cortisol, stress hormone levels in the human brain. So just my place is full of plants. I've got trees and plants in here. I'm building a small jungle in my living room.
Bringing the jungle to your house.
Right, because I just felt liberated in the jungle. No Wi-Fi, no electricity. And it was just that in itself, without the ayahuasca ceremonies, is very powerful. But drinking the plant medicine under the supervision of a shaman in the Maloka, which is this huge pitch black wooden sort of circular structure raised off the ground, and you have to sort of take your shoes off to go in, and everyone has a mat in a circle around the Maloka, and you sort of sit there at 7:30 waiting for the shaman and the shaman's wife, and they come in and they light the candle in the middle of the room. It's pitch black, and you can just hear the jungle. The jungle is like a cacophony of sound at night. The noises you hear is just phenomenal. You can't even work out what half the sounds are. Yeah. And of course it's everyone is called up individually to drink the ayahuasca.
Yeah, just to kind of explain a bit about what ayahuasca actually is for anyone who doesn't know. So it's a combination of two different plants, isn't it? So the Amazon's obviously full of, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of plants are in the Amazon. That's what I find so incredible. They've discovered that mixing these two specific plants together has this incredible medicinal effect. And Yeah, maybe if you just want to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I was there was to help heal someone medically who I brought, just to give the background to it. And ayahuasca has been shown to heal a particular medical complaint, which is to do with the brain. So I was with someone to kind of be involved in that healing. But the medicine itself, you're right, is well, can be more than two different plants, but at least two. And one of those plants contains a very high level of N,N-dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which is in all plants. We now believe it's produced by the human brain.
I was going to say it's within us, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's even talk about it being related to the pineal gland. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And it seems like perhaps when we die, the pineal gland gives you a burst of DMT, which is almost the release of the consciousness from the vehicle of the body. So there's been studies with rats showing that, I believe, the dimethyltryptamine being released from the pineal gland. So it's in the body, it's natural, it's in all plants in varying degrees, is my understanding. And the one that the shaman uses, the plant, one in particular, has a very high level of the DMT, and they combine it, they boil it for 5 days in a big pot with another plant which contains what they call a monoamine oxidase inhibitor.
Yeah.
That's an MAOI. And the MAOI inhibits the monoamine oxidase, which is already in your body, which breaks down the DMT. Because otherwise, if we just drink the DMT, it would just be metabolized, so to speak.
Yeah, so your own body, your stomach would overcome the effects of the DMT. So you need to have this other ingredient, this other plant to counteract that.
That's it. Yeah. To stop your body from just quickly gobbling it all up without the experience. So
how did they find that out? That baffles me.
Well, we asked the shaman Enrique about this through a translator, obviously, and he says to us, the plants talk to us. So he's drunk ayahuasca since he was a small boy, and he says the plants communicate with us, and the plants tell us which ones to combine, because they don't grow close to each other. Apparently, they grow miles apart. So there is a through spirit, the plants talk to the shaman and talk to the people in the village, and they will say, this combination or this plant. For example, there is a bark which can cure bladder cancer. He was showing us the particular bark in the jungle. There is a plant cure for all human ailments and diseases. So they will in a separate part of the camp, which is quite far away. They will boil it in this big metal drum for sort of 5 days, and then that's what they will use for the ceremony. It's very bitty, viscous, bright, sort of orange liquid, which has my friend who I went to the jungle with says he likes the taste of it, but I would challenge anyone to enjoy the taste of it. It's a very bitter, very unique taste that stays with you for a long time.
How much of it do you end up consuming in one sitting? Is it a serious amount, or has a serious effect?
Yeah, so it does have different effects. So on my first ceremony, it was sort of half a cup, and the cup is probably this tall, and I don't know if you can see, but kind of this wide. So it's certainly bigger than an egg cup. And it was half full on my first night, and then on my second night, I wanted to go deep with it, because I was there under the shaman's supervision to heal someone who was with me and who couldn't drink. So I was drinking on his behalf, and so I drank a full cup on the second ceremony, which was a few days later, and the full cup I drank on an empty stomach. So I'd been fasting, because they told me that if you fast, it's 30% stronger, the effects. But I didn't realize I didn't realize, right, like the psilocybin mushrooms. And I didn't realize he was going to give me the full the full cup that night, and I thought it'd be another half a cup. So there's me trying to kind of make it stronger, which it doesn't need to be, by the way. It's a really interesting and gentle thing, and it is. There's so much science about how it heals the body. There's something in it called Harmine, which is very healing for the body, but also in healing any kind of psychological trauma that people might have. And I sort of lay down for the experience because it is very, very powerful. There are parts of the experience that for me felt like I was on a very strong roller coaster. All of the G-force you get on a roller coaster?
Actually, yeah. Sorry, there's so many things I want to ask you about. Sorry, you carry on.
Yeah, no, interrupt me at any time.
I was just going to say, the T-shirt I'm wearing is by an artist called Alex Gray.
I spotted that.
Yeah, so he's his artwork is based on DMT trips, and
I've seen it.
Yeah, so the description you gave there of like a roller coaster. So a lot of the visuals that I've seen from people's artwork or their descriptions is like it's almost like a fractal type chamber type thing which seems to go on forever almost.
Yeah.
But that's part of it.
That's right. Yeah, you do. You see what I saw and what lots of people see. They call the torus. So you can look up the torus, which is it's basically a tube. It's similar. The colorings are very orange and yellow, just like your T-shirt. And the tube itself is kind of it sort of tapers out at the bottom, and it comes up like this, and then it sort of tapers out again. And if you Google it, you'll be able to see it. And it's kind of like sucking up and forcing out, but it's turning and moving. But I saw it in the horizontal position, and it's almost like the face of the entity there is kind of embodied in the torus itself. You meet entities in the experience.
Machine elves, I hear, from Terence McKenna.
Yeah, I didn't meet the machine elves, but I certainly went to different dimensions. One of the dimensions I went to was kind of like a very vibrant garden. Like Haribo sweets, very kind of like glossy colors that don't really exist here in that level of vibrancy. And you're sort of guided through, and they call ayahuasca Mother Ayahuasca because she's very gentle, and the experience comes on quite slowly. It's a very positive experience for most people, provided
and a very feminine form. That's something I kind of hear about as well. So that's
very.
How like what tangible feeling do you have of that? And like, is it? Are you scared at all during it, or you just go with it? And
I wasn't scared. No, there was no fear. But I think a lot of that has to do with meditation, because the kind of state where mind and body are gone can be achieved by sitting still for long periods of time. So, and I was just lying still for a long period of time. So there was no fear at all. It was very, at one point, you're kind of laughing hysterically, and it's very overwhelmingly beautiful. So there's sort of tears coming down your face, but through laughter and joy, there's no fear. For me, it was all very positive experience, very powerful, not something to be taken lightly, but very, very positive, and so much sacred geometry, things that seem very Egyptian, very Pythagorean in terms of mathematical things that are there. And it kind of it looks like the kind of fabric of the universal matrix.
That's the descriptions I've heard are exactly. Isn't it weird? I find it quite. There's something about everyone. Well, not everyone, but most people have some kind of a shared experience where they're seeing very similar types of things, and it's just, if it is a creation within your own mind, why would everyone see the same kind of stuff? And this is interesting because before my ayahuasca experience, I didn't
do lots of research about other people's experiences on purpose.
Okay.
And when I came back, I kind of looked up. I didn't want mine to be. I didn't want to be primed, and then my subconscious create these things. So I come back in a very quick Google. You find out that people are seeing the Taurus, people are seeing the sacred geometry, and I had no preconceived idea of what I was going to see. Nothing at all. But these things came up, and other people described the same experience. And for me, it feels like that the DMT molecule, which is already in your body, is kind of like the key to unlocking your consciousness into other dimensions. This is the understanding that was gifted back to me from my experience. In the same way that the eye requires photons, light particles, to be able to see. If you don't fire photons into your eyes, they don't work. If you don't fire DMT into the brain, the consciousness cannot. It's a mechanism for allowing the consciousness to transcend and jump out of the three-dimensional, the third dimension, and into the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, however deep you're able to go. That's how it was experienced.
It's fascinating. Again, so many questions. I'm just trying to. So you were saying that you did this on behalf of someone who you were caring for. So how did that work?
So the person I was with, and I won't disclose anything to keep that. The person I was with, it wasn't able to swallow the medicine. So there was and the idea was to go there and try and get some of the medicine in this person. But the shaman said, this person doesn't need to drink it. You can drink on this person's behalf.
Okay.
And we'll bring them into the Maloka as well. They will sit next to you. And as long as my intention, because intention is so powerful.
Especially psychedelics of any kind.
Yeah, absolutely. And my intention was healing. And I also had an intention, not just for healing the person next to me, but for healing someone back home in Jersey who was not very well at the time. And quite interestingly, the person back in Jersey who had this issue, and call it coincidence or not, the issue was resolved, and it was quite a serious medical issue. And the issue was all of a sudden resolved when I came back, and I was like, wow, I didn't tell this person what I had been my intention. I was like, wow, that's really interesting that's transpired that way.
That must have made you feel good to know that you've gifted someone that.
That's it, and our intentions are literally everything. That whatever our intention is each day determines the quality of our very existence. If we wake up and have the intention and the awareness of kindness and compassion, which is our natural internal state, then life just opens up like a flower and just gifts you, through gratitude. Sorry,
it's so true that if you throw out negative vibes, then that's probably what's going to be coming back at you. But obviously, if you approach everything in a more positive way, then the chances are that good things will come back to you. It sounds so so basic, but
it's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's almost, and the spiritual teaching is like, it's not even saying be positive, because you can't go against your nature, but it's just saying be realistic, as in be aware of what is actually here. So you're waking up and you're breathing. The fact that you're waking up and breathing is in itself miraculous.
Yeah,
it's absolute. You're alive, and you have another day to change the overall conscious pool to better or worse. So you could wake up and be grateful and be like, wow, okay, I'm going to smile at the shopkeeper. I'm going to open the door for this person. Mm-hmm. This is my karma yoga. And when I do these things and I feel good inside, I realize that compassion and kindness isn't for me. It isn't for other people. It is for me.
Okay, right.
So being compassionate and being kind is not for the other peoples and the other sentient beings on the planet. It literally changes your internal state. And particularly at the moment where people are worried about a virus, the most important thing you can do is feel joyful and pleasant, because this literally changes the T cells, the immune response in the T cells in the body. If you feel pleasant and joyful inside and you don't have any dis-ease, as in you're not in a state of dis-ease, you don't experience disease. This is why there's studies going on looking at yogis. Why don't yogis get sick when they have their hatha yoga practices?
Interesting. I know you mentioned, I mentioned the sea swimming before, and you said you did it as well. And again, I kind of write a few notes about where I think the conversation is going to go. We've totally gone off, but that's perfect. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. But no, it's brilliant. So I take it you're probably aware of Wim Hof.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's an interesting case as well. In terms of the power of the mind, essentially, and the way, people thought he was full of shit, essentially, really, well, he was some kind of a freak, and then. So there was a big study of people injected with E. coli, I believe, and it was like 16,000 people or something like that, and they all suffered. They all had symptoms associated with that disease. He was then tested exactly the same way, injected with E. coli, nothing wrong with him. Everyone said, "Oh, it's just because you're the Iceman. You're a freak of nature," and then he taught a group of people his kind of principles, and they did the same with them, and they had no symptoms either. So again, I kind of deviated a little bit, but it's fascinating, the power of the mind. And I bet you there'd be some skeptical people listening thinking that is a load of shit, but it's, as you say, science is slowly but surely coming round to agreeing with this stuff, which I just find, that's why I find it so. You almost can't dismiss anything these days. I mean, within reason, but it's so important to have an open mind, because you never know what's going to work for you or for other people.
And people forget that. And if you look at the sea swimming and how that changes the immune system, and it helps with they're now saying that it can help fight against dementia. I don't know if you saw that in the news recently. What people in our Western culture really don't understand, and this is why I'll do any podcast. I'm constantly trying to get this message out there, and the message is that this human body that we have is the most sophisticated piece of technology on the planet by a very, very long way. And there is a user manual for this piece of technology. There is a user manual in the yogic sciences. All of the things that the yogis have been talking about for so many years, okay? And even as far back in, if you look at the Tao Te Ching, looking at consciousness, this is 4th century BC China, Lao Tzu. This is a long time ago. People have known for a very long time that this technology is very powerful. And if we hold it in the right positions and do the right act consciously with it, act in alignment with our experience rather than beliefs, we can live a very long time. We can be very healthy, very joyful, very blissed out, without the need for alcohol, without the need for holidays and things,
literally, and things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This technology we've known for so long, and people now, Western science is saying, we've discovered this thing called time-restricted eating. And the yogis are saying, fasting. Yeah, we've been doing that for a very long time. They're like, when you fast over 18 hours, you get autophagy, and the body rejuvenates its cells, and it's powerful for the immune system. We're working out the timings, and the yogis are like, listen, we have been talking about fasting. We understand the things that we need to put in the body, the things the body should drink, and the things the body should eat. And it's very obvious when you understand food and drink and posture, what we should be doing with our body. In the Western culture, possibly on purpose, was guided the wrong way. They were very almost nefariously guided towards unconscious living.
Yeah.
Consumerism
and capitalism, isn't it? And that kind of wanting more and more and more.
Yeah, and of course, why is heart disease and cancer the number one? The heart disease is the biggest killer in the world, followed by cancer. This is particularly in the West. This isn't true in parts of Japan, where the diet is very, very different, and the culture is different. The culture that we have here is toxic. The culture is toxic in that it is the amount that we drink alcohol wise, the types of food that we eat, which are processed and coming very much from animal products, which we know do awful things in the gut, our gut, which is so long, and they stay in there and they cause problems for us. And trying to convince a Western mind which has operated through belief, for such a long time, who has become unwell through maybe obesity, heart disease, cancers, depression, anxiety. It's very difficult to unpick all of the beliefs which have been indoctrinated into this individual by explaining, well, if you live consciously, you will innately and intuitively know what to put in your body just by looking at it. Yeah. And you'll know what to do and how to hold your body, the importance of the spine, the importance of the posture and synchronizing yourself with the divine. And this sounds like such a far out concept to many people and groups that I speak with. I go into banks and financial institutions from time to time, and it really concerns me how out of touch with conscious presence humans have got to. But it feels like we're now on the precipice of a great change. Yeah. And people are going, that Wim Hof, we looked at the study with the endotoxin they injected into him, and he taught that to other people, and then they were okay. And people seem to need science rather than experience in order to indulge something. Whereas I would recommend, do it anyway. You've got nothing to lose. If you're anxious and depressed, and 99.9% of all psychological distress is self-induced.
Yeah, of course. By
believing the mind. There is a small percentage of you could say pathology to the brain, but really 99.9% of all of the psychological drama can be overcome like this.
Yeah.
By understanding our conscious self. And realizing that everything that we have been told and taught is perhaps fallacious and detrimental to our mental and physical well-being.
Yeah,
which
it's
is a shame,
isn't it? What's the power behind that, do you think, and why? Well, I guess we kind of covered why. It's all about money, isn't it? Really, normally, but money and following rules, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if your agenda is to control a population or make money out of a population, then it would be useful that they don't question things, that they believe things, and you augment culture in such a way that ensures that the vast majority follow this road. The school system, the university system, the work system, the entertainment elements are all geared up in such a way to prevent people from going within and to draw them to the desires without. So that makes a lot of money. There are schools of thought which would say that negative thought has a certain level of negative energy, which can be harnessed by particular evil elements in the world. This isn't part of my experience, so it's not something I would comment on. The only thing I can comment on is my own experience, which led me from a very mainstream life of consumerism, not feeling particularly great, feeling good on a Friday but bad on a Monday, desiring things, going within removed all of the desire. And when you have no desire for things, all of a sudden there's no tension within you. You know, things are easy when you understand to accept reality as it is, accept it and enjoy the moments instead of trying to, you know, in school, it's like, oh, you know, once you've done your GCSEs, then, or once you've done your A levels, then it'll be this. And then once you've done university, and then once you've got that job, and then the job, there's a promotion. Yeah, right. Exactly, and then then there's retirement, and then you've wished the life away trying to get somewhere rather than just enjoying the journey. Like we talked about Alan Watts, and Alan Watts says quite beautifully that life is like a dance or a piece of music. When you put the music on or you start the dance, you have no interest in the end, the final move.
Yeah.
You are,
because otherwise you would just do the final move, wouldn't you? If it was about the destination, then you would just do the last move and you're done. But
exactly. You say it exactly right. If it was about the destination, then you would just perform the destination and be done with it. But it's not. Life is much like this, and there's so much joy to be found in things that people think are mundane and boring. There is a joyfulness within which we can let out, unleash. But in order to do this, we have to let go of kind of everything that we've been taught, everything that we've been told. And that is not the journey from the head to the heart, as they say in the Buddhist traditions, can be a long journey, and it's not an easy journey to make without any real evidence. You know, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have the plant medicine and have a defined experience of not being in the body, not being in the mind. You know, there's no breath, there's no thinking. All that is stripped away for you so that you just experience the now, the present, the eternal now, which is a very, very peaceful, calm place to be. But to be brought up in this part of the world, and I work with many people who are very unpleasant through choice. Don't smile in the morning or look up from the desk or want to engage. And it's because I think fundamentally humans have forgotten that we are mortal and we will anyway die one day. And wouldn't it be better if we were pleasant to each other and kind and caring and you know, if you treat each interaction or exchange with someone as perhaps the last time you're ever going to see that person. You know, and you treat that shopkeeper as though they're your best friend. You know, you treat them as though they're someone that you really care for. Then they become someone that you really care for, and it's a much more exuberant and magical way to live out this existence.
It's a beautiful way to do it, I think.
It is, and it alleviates us from the suffering. The self-induced suffering of the mind, which is fundamentally built upon not accepting things as they are. There's an underlying assumption that this thing shouldn't be happening to me. You know, like I've got a sick relative, and work is like this, and there's all these things, and I always just say, well, where are those things right now as you're talking to me? Where are they? They're not here in this moment. This moment's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong in this moment now. So if there's nothing wrong in this moment now, why are we using our memory and imagination to induce suffering?
I was just about to say something very similar. So it seems, whether it's true or not, again, science, it seems that humans are one of, if not the only species to be able to kind of project forward and to have that kind of imagination and that planning ability, perhaps, but it can be very dangerous. And I want to ask you about some quotes in a minute, but one that I can't remember who said it, but the name Dandapari. Is that Dandapari? Anyway,
okay.
Something along the lines of where attention goes, energy flows, and that can be both positive and negative. if you're not careful and you do have negative thoughts about something, it can be constantly on your mind, and that kind of snowball becomes an avalanche of.
Yeah, this is exactly true. This is exactly true. Wherever your attention is, you are giving energy, conscious energy, which is very, very powerful. If those thoughts are negative, and you have a thought, and then a negative thought, and you pay attention to it, and instead of just observing it, you believe it. You don't
magnify it almost.
You magnify it. You feed your consciousness into it, rather than just objectively looking at it and going, well, it's just a thought. I don't need to believe everything I think, because most of my thoughts are anyway not mine. They're given to me by our culture. So there's that thought, and then there's this thought connected to it. And then eventually what you get is a thought form, a form of a multitude of different thoughts with a negative outlook and a negative energy, which are usually your imagination. And that thought form causes untold internal damage and creates sickness, disease, and illness. Stress, yeah. Stress, which is sorry, I'm receiving phone calls
I thought you just froze then for a second.
So we have this ball of negative energy, which will cause stress. Stress is made up. It's made up by the mind. Stress isn't real. It's a choice. You can choose not to feel stress. That can be quite that can feel quite difficult for most people who say, no, actually stress is something that happens to me. No, it's not true. We're not affected by things. We're affected by our perception of things.
Yeah, and I think that's where meditation is a very very, very useful tool for that. I found myself, sometimes you can acknowledge, you sense anger or whatever that feeling is building up inside you, and rather than instantly reacting to it, just taking a step back and just acknowledging it, seeing it, and hopefully pushing it back away. It doesn't always work, but yeah.
Practice. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
There's so we've spoken briefly a little bit about Alan Watts. What drew you towards him, and is there any other influences that you've had over the years that you would recommend people looking into, and any cool quotes perhaps from any of those kind of characters as well?
I
love a quote.
So many.
Yeah.
I mean, Alan Watts puts the Zen Buddhism in a very poetic way, and some people find it quite difficult to understand coming from Alan Watts. He's very articulate,
unbelievable speaker.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Like poetic is exactly the right word to describe it. He's like a trickster. He has fun with it as well. He's very playful.
Yeah, and he exposes the mind really for what it is. But for me, all of the spiritual speakers are all saying exactly the same thing. It's just a different way of getting there. You know, if I want to walk from here to St. Juan, there's many different roads I can take. I could go this road, which is the Zen road. I could go this road, which is the Samadhi mindfulness road. You know, or this road is the yogic tradition. They will all get you there anyway. The most important thing is that you just stay on the road. You know, someone once said to me, you know, if you're trying to dig a well to find water, if you start digging the well and then get distracted and go, oh no, I'm going to dig it over there, and you can have lots of fairly deep holes,
half dug wells, yeah.
Yeah, but you won't have found water. You know, the metaphor being water being the enlightenment. So it doesn't really matter so much how you get there. A lot of people get there with yoga. You know, some forms are much more potent than others. For me, I initially got into mindfulness through the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn, because he wrote. I remember reading. If people are interested, reading. First of all, I read "Wherever You Go, There You Are" by Jon Kabat-Zinn, which is a really good introduction to mindfulness, with some good practices in there. And then I read his bigger, more sort of comprehensive book, which is called Full Catastrophe Living. And this was a really good inroad because it has a lot of science and a lot of studies in there too. And I was still coming from a very scientific standpoint on the topic. And then from there, I've gone down many different roads. The thing that has been most powerful for me was probably the tantric science, and Shiva's 112 methods for awakening. There's so much in there. You only need one of these methods, just one method that works for you, and your life is changed forever. And Osho has a very good book, the Book of Secrets, which I could not recommend highly enough. And of course, Eckhart Tolle, the Power of Now, which is great for the Western palate. I think he's gone down very well over here. And to deepen the understanding, the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. Very short book, but just full of the more poetic.
Watts refers to Lao Tzu quite a lot, actually. Someone I need to. I haven't heard of him beyond Alan Watts as reference to him, but yeah.
Yeah, this is the Tao, the book of the way, the Wu Wei, which is just the path of no resistance. A beautiful quote from that book, which resonated with me, was "Give evil nothing to oppose, and it will disappear on its own." And I remember having read that, "Give evil nothing to oppose, and it will disappear on its own." I remember this being part of the awakening process for me. And I remember driving. I drive on this road quite regularly, and there's a narrowing as I'm going along on the left. There's a narrowing on the other the oncoming driver's side. It narrows, so it's sort of it's the right of way for this person and not that person. So I'd be driving along, and this this car very quickly speeds towards me to get through, and I'm sort of already there. And the old ego me would have tried to compete with him and gone, no, the blue sign is on my side. It says it's my right of way. I probably would have gone, I'm right and you're wrong. But that would have created a really unpleasant internal state for me and for this other person as well. So instead, I literally gave him nothing to oppose, and I just sat and let him drive through with a smile, as in, you come through after you. And that moment of offering friction and negativity, no opposition, and not changing my internal state in any way was so liberating.
Yeah,
that
could have been something that pissed you off for the whole day and probably annoyed them as well. And and I have a choice. We all have a choice in each moment of the day to either affect the quality of the day positively or negatively. And if that person's already feeling angry and upset, if I smile and let him go first, it doesn't really change my day. Well, it doesn't change my day at all. But in fact, it does. It makes my day more pleasant because I opted for pleasantness. Yeah. I don't let my internal state of pleasantness be modulated externally by somebody else or something else. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, there's no need to engage in conflict if there is none. You need to create conflict. Exactly. So the Tao Te Ching is full of it's this path of no resistance. It's emptiness, nothingness, purposelessness, not trying to get somewhere, trying to get more, trying to be this, trying to be that. Is just accepting the awareness and the floaty easiness, the calm abiding that we have within us. And it's such a pleasant. Isn't it nice to be nice? Isn't it nice to be pleasant? Yeah. People have forgotten this. It costs nothing, and it really is our natural state. Everything else is just added through thought. And the COVID situation at the moment has really elucidated that. I've seen. I was going to say let's move on to the COVID stuff, because you've been doing some pretty incredible stuff during this time. It's funny, after speaking to people, I was thinking, do I do I want to touch the COVID side of things? It's been in every single one so far, because it's inescapable, isn't it? It is our reality now. So yeah, maybe if you just like to tell people what you've been up to and
yeah. For me, it's been a huge opportunity, just a huge opportunity to come across fear and negativity and unconsciousness. It's allowed me to deepen my practice and teach more people. I mean, the amount of people I am now teaching online because of COVID, because of the fear, anxiousness, stress, all the imagination stuff, has just gone mad. I'm having to turn people away until next year because of this. And for me, the crux of it is that, from what I can see, is the media and government have been extremely irresponsible in the way that they have spoken to the mass population. Yeah. They have, whether they're cognizant of this or not, they have stirred the pot of fear and worry in a very, very vulnerable cohort of our society. People with existing mental health problems, the elderly who are relying on their television for their
support and company.
The support, right, and their information too. Yeah. And a lot of misinformation has gone out. And even just, our government has sent us, I've received a text message from our government here, the government here, and it was very direct, very unkind, and very unpleasant. About I forget what it was about, mask wearing, I think.
Yeah.
I would love to speak with them. There are much more pleasant ways we can talk to each other and communicate with each other, and the way that we communicate with each other is almost more important than the content. It's all.
No one likes to be dictated to, do they? So.
No, and it's just unpleasant and unkind, and they don't like to be dictated to either on a fundamental human level. So I've been trying to explain to people, well, there's people doing unkind things and you should be doing this. And everyone seems to have an opinion. The problem is everyone has a belief. So there's a great quote from Byron Katie, an American author. And she says, there are no terrible people. There are believers. If I believed what they believed, I would have done that too. So there are no terrible people. There are just believers. It's like when, in 1944 with the Second World War and Hitler, there was an indoctrination process, and ostensibly good people did extremely evil and reprehensible things because they believed what they were told, because they are not auditing the mind. They're not auditing the information being presented to them. COVID is no different in the sense that information is being put out to people, and most people are anyway not auditing it and critically observing it. There is a level of just, well, this must be true. And the media are putting out things which are literally not true.
Yeah, I mean, even before all this happened, the bad news sells, doesn't it? It's very it's very unoften that you will see good news in the news in the post and newspapers, or whether on TV. It's predominantly bad news stories, isn't it? So this has been, I imagine, for people. I've stopped watching the news a while ago, but yeah, for people who were just sat there with it on repeat, and people who've been in, like, we've been quite lucky with our lockdown situation. But imagine if you're just stuck in the house and you've just got that on a loop. Must be, the mental health issues must be.
Yeah, I mean, of course it's going to be torture for people with mental health issues. And I saw an article the other day, and I don't know, I haven't looked into the statistics, so I don't want to repeat it as though this is an objective fact, but I saw an article which said that the suicide rates in China, deaths by suicide were higher for the period of March to the end of October than the deaths caused by COVID.
That doesn't surprise me.
That is extremely powerful. That just goes to show how irresponsible the media outlets and governments have been, and many humans are being irresponsible here and not being understanding that we might all be in the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. And that boat can either be the mind and your level of your mental functioning and psychological functioning, or even just the place you live. Lockdown for someone living in a beautiful home with a swimming pool is a very different experience for someone living in a bedsit without even a balcony. It's a very different experience.
I don't want to drop anyone in it, but during our initial lockdown, someone I know was complaining that they wouldn't be able to go away, and they've got they wanted to go on holiday. They love their holidays, that's fine, but they've got a beautiful home, they've got a swimming pool, and I was thinking, like, cheer up. It could be a lot worse.
It could be. This is it, and with a belief. With belief is the issue with this, and like you said, you've stopped watching the news. I also we got rid of our TV. We don't have a TV in the house. There's no news, none, because how can we tell what's real? So much of it isn't real, or rather, it's sensationalized reality, which is equally as bad. So turning off the news, turning off the radio, and going into nature and realigning with our consciousness and what we understand to be true. Like I keep saying to people, okay, people keep throwing around the word pandemic, but I walk through a town center and there's a full Costa coffee. And people who are going in the hospital are saying the hospital is not full of COVID cases. The backup one is empty. And I just say,
it's interesting, isn't it?
It's interesting if you are living in alignment with reality. If a terrifying pandemic disappears and vanishes into thin air the moment you turn off the mainstream media, that should tell you something. And if we just operate by what we can see rather than what we are told, and that's important, operate on what we experience, what is within our actual experience, rather than believing the things that we are told, then all of a sudden fear goes gone, vanished. There's no fear.
What's that quote? Fear is the mind killer. I can't remember the full thing, but yeah, about facing your fear. But I must be slightly careful about how I come across because I must say I don't know how I sit on it, to be honest. Because my cousin-in-law actually contracted COVID in the UK, and he was really ill, nearly died. Actually, he's actually the first person I've had on the podcast, and he was experiencing he nearly died, and like I said,
oh my gosh,
he had incredible experiences, hallucinations, and all kinds of weird stuff was going on. So, yeah, there's obviously something to it, but I think, like you're saying, fear is almost. Well, the example of China that you gave there with the suicide rate, it can almost be more damaging than the virus itself, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a scientist.
No, me either. And of course, there's a lot of misinformation. There's all sorts. There's all sorts of opinions on it, but
that doesn't help with anxiety either, does it? People, misinformation and conflicting information. So one week, masks don't work. The next week, everyone has to wear a mask. Flip-flopping from one to the other leaves people in a state of anxiousness.
Yeah, it's really unkind, and I would definitely, I always implore the media and government to just really think about the way you are communicating, and how you are communicating your message, because there are very vulnerable people out there. Fear is a choice, but it is literally just the imagination. If you are identified as the mind and you have a fearful thought, then it will affect you. If you can allow the mind to just have fearful thoughts from time to time, but not indulge them, that's the skill of meditation.
Yeah,
that's the skill. Meditation is not a practice. To be meditative is our true natural state, which can observe the body in the same way that it can observe the mind and observe the breeze and the sun and people in the street in the same way that it can observe the body and the mind. We understand that we're not the body, we're not the mind. We are the awareness behind the emotion, behind the thought, behind the sensation of the body. And that is the true liberation. There are many practices, like we say, many disciplines for achieving that state, which is available for everybody. with some very, very basic, very simple practices.
Well, just to continue on from what you're saying there, then, and kind of lead us to the next kind of section, which I have written down. Do you have any personal routines that you implement on a daily basis, or when you teach people, do you have certain things that you would recommend to everyone, or is everyone a different case?
Everyone is different, and it's very, when I'm talking to individuals, it's very personalized, and we try different things. And if someone really isn't getting on with something, there are many hundreds of techniques which I've just accumulated through reading over the years and understanding this and practicing myself. My daily practice is a very early start, without fail, every day. I don't set an alarm. My body wakes up. It knows when to wake up.
And normally what time is that?
About 5, half 5.
That's good going.
And well, the things that make us tired, overthinking makes you tired. So when the mind is no longer the master, it becomes the servant, you have more energy and vitality. So you can sort of work through the night and survive on very little sleep and still feel pretty good. So I will wake up and feel very grateful, and immediately be aware of mind, because if I've just been asleep, mind will have been involved in that. So I'm immediately aware that I'm alive, aware that I am mortal, aware that I'm awake. I will often say I am, not out loud, but internally I will say I am. This is one of the tantric technologies from the Book of Secrets. When we say I am and don't finish the sentence, you're sort of teaching your awareness that it is the awareness. You're re-identifying with I am. It just I am. I am this nothingness. I am this awareness. So I am. That just helps create the distance between the awareness and the mind from the very first moment of the day. And then I will do my at least an hour. So it will be a combination of meditation and yoga. So I enjoy Kundalini yoga, breath of fire techniques, which are very, very powerful. But I like to sit in silence. Sitting in silence is one of the most important things we could do on the planet right now, because it creates joyfulness, pleasantness. The mind becomes under some sort of understanding and control. So I'll sit in silence, be aware of the breath in the body, and aware of the thoughts in the same way that I'm aware of the breath. I will go on to doing some of my yoga, some hatha yoga practices, one of the asanas, that I enjoy. And then once I've completed the practice, that's kind of when the real meditation begins. So now I can apply myself to the world with this superpower of awareness. I can see things that other people can't see. My intuition is sort of at a different level. You're sort of gearing up, being more awake than everybody else around you. And when people say to me, I had a conversation with someone on Skype recently, and I work closely with this person, and they said, oh, what have you been doing? I'm like, this is during lockdown. I was like, exercising, getting plenty of time for the meditation. And this person says to me, yeah, I've been exercising too, but I've not been meditating though. And there's a sense where I'm kind of like, well, I know you haven't been meditating, because I can tell.
Sense it. Yeah.
I can tell by the way the person is talking. I can tell by the way they're feeling, their energy, even if they're not in the room. I can tell that they have worries, concerns, anxieties. They're not happy with this or that. I can tell. And it really does give you an advantage for living, a certain quality of coherence of thought and coherence. My actions are conscious. I'm not eating processed sugary foods. Everything I do has a conscious
an awareness.
Has a consciousness to it. So the practice bleeds into the day and takes off the thinking glasses and just gives me a presence, so that I can't be negatively or adversely affected by one of the 50 to 70,000 thoughts that the human mind has in a day, which is an insane amount of thoughts to have in a day. And or the things that happen, if something doesn't go right, if my car blows a tire, I will still enjoy it. I will enjoy it. I won't be cursing and kicking and swearing.
Just similar to that, I bought an electric bike recently, and the battery bloody broke the other day, and it was one of those cases of, okay, there was a split second I was annoyed, and then I just thought, this isn't doing me any good. It's not going to fix it. It's not going to make me feel better. So just let it go.
Right. Yeah.
There's no benefit to getting annoyed about something like that. So very similar kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. People will always say, "Oh, don't cry over spilt milk." That's a really old saying, but it's very true in that you have a choice when something. The phone rings a lot. My apologies.
No worries. Well, I've kept you for a little while, but yeah, if you don't mind just continuing for a bit about your routines and things like that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So the remainder of the day is a constant understanding of consciousness. So to have a spiritual dimension to your life is to be consciously aware of your awareness in each moment of the day, in each interaction, without falling. And you might have to, if you want to begin this journey into discovering what you really are. And if you're one of these people who wins the fictional arguments in the shower, or drives from A to B without having recollection of the journey, or you're repeating conversations in your head, I should have said this, should have said that, or before you get to work you're imagining things, and if you're that type of person, you're really hijacking your own life. I would recommend putting an alarm on your phone every hour just to go off, and when it chimes, just go, oh yes, am I here? Am I present? Pinching yourself. Am I here in this moment now? Or am I letting thoughts of, there's too much traffic, I should have left sooner, and now I'm going to be late, and then my boss is going to be upset, I'm going to lose my job, and people will catastrophize their life, when really it can be very simple.
Self-sabotage almost, isn't it?
Unconscious self-sabotage. And if we live unconsciously, we don't have free will. We can't, because of course we're living through beliefs. Beliefs are given to us by other people, by our education system, by culture, by the media. So when we become conscious, we review beliefs, get rid of them because we realize they're not serving us, and we just see everything as it is. We don't look up to people, we don't look down on people, we just see everybody in this moment exactly as they are. And it is the most regardless of what they did yesterday. Well, I have no opinion of anyone I know, because however they present today is how they are to me. No looking up, no looking down, because that's the only way you ever really get to see people, see them as they are. And it's such a powerful way to conduct yourself, and your quality of life and your sensitivity to life goes up exponentially. And of course, suffering is a negative correlate of spirituality. There's the suffering is gone.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, because from, again, not an expert, from what I've read, suffering seems to be quite a almost like a tenet of the Buddhist belief system, in well, whether you would call it that, but that life is almost suffering. Yeah, how would you agree with that? And is the tools that you're practicing and adopting, does that enable you to pass through that suffering and almost to recognize it, acknowledge it, but not let it consume you, perhaps?
It's almost the other way round, though, because great suffering gives rise to greater consciousness. So suffering is the gift, if we can see suffering as a gift, when something very challenging and tragic happens, there is a very powerful emotion, and it is an opportunity for a conscious level up. So you will often find that people who have ended up in prison will will read the Tao Te Ching, or they will all of a sudden have a conscious awakening, because the shock and the suffering of prison has just jolted the consciousness out. So it's important, the universe gifts us suffering, if we can see it in that way, to help us to become more conscious. And it will only give you what you're capable of overcoming. If we can see it like the path of life there's so much happening on the path of life, and people kind of see events as like a roadblock, like something bad happens and it's blocking the path. But the way to see it is that really these things that happen to us are not blockages or obstacles. They are the path. Right, they are the path.
Yeah.
They're not blockages on the path that are slowing your path or hindering you. They are the journey. Yeah. That is why we're here. We are here to level up our consciousness. We're here to become more conscious, sentient beings and overcome all of this stuff that has been given to us through belief and assumption and dogma and all that stuff, so that we can cultivate a true sense of what's real and what isn't real. So the suffering is a fundamental part of the process of awakening, and then in turn our consciousness allows us to deal with suffering in a much easier way. There's no resistance to challenging events that happen to us. You can use your conscious presence when you're sat waiting in a hospital, or whatever unpleasant, challenging scenario comes up. We can then use this consciousness to accept it and be in it, rather than operating through the assumption that bad things shouldn't happen to us. Yeah. So there's a real opportunity when we're suffering to become more conscious, because of course, if you think of it like this, if you say to a child, what's worse? Is it worse if you stub your toe and hurt yourself, or someone punches you, or is it worse if they call you names? The child will say, oh, when someone calls me names, it's way worse, because it hurts me later in the day, and I'm trying to go to sleep at night and it's still hurting me. But if you stub your toe, after 20 minutes, forgotten, right? The emotional pain is far worse and deeper cutting than a physical pain, and all humans experience this. So as we suffer, we can learn that actually I've had enough of suffering now. I'm sick of suffering. There's been enough of it. What is the alternative? And the alternative is to not add thinking onto a challenging situation. If I stub my toe or stand in dog poo, if I can observe it and accept it, and even maybe smile and just look at what's actually happening, or I could say, oh, I can't believe this has happened. Now I'm going to be late. These new shoes are ruined, and all of these thoughts. If I can, when those thoughts come, if I can just go, here they are. Of course, they've turned up. And now, instead of indulging them and believing them, I'm going to audit them. And I'm going to go, I'm not going to allow them to draw my conscious energy. Instead, I'm going to realize that they're there and realize if they've started to have an effect on me, but I'm going to just move my awareness away. I'm going to be aware of what's actually happened, rather than being hammered by my thoughts about what's happened.
I like that. I think that's a good approach to life, isn't it? And there's so much more that I could talk to you about, but I think I'd actually think it would be good to have you back on at some point, and perhaps there's a few of these things we could speak about in even more detail, and perhaps if I get myself a little bit more educated too, then we can go even deeper. But thank you for raising my awareness and my consciousness in the last
Thank you for
hour
having
and
me.
a half. Mate, it's been awesome. Some unexpected subject matter came up, and it was a really good conversation with you, mate. So I thank you very much for coming on and taking time out of your day to do this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Is there any way or anywhere that people can find out about the stuff you do?
So I am on social media with My Mindful Guru, and also mymindfulguru.com if you want to book a one-to-one session, although availability is quite limited, but I can book people in for next year, or if I have cancellations, I'm sort of slotting things in. So yeah, if you have an organization who might benefit from a talk on mindfulness, or colleagues who might benefit, just spread the word, and I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone who gets in touch.
No, that's great, and I'll make sure I put a link in the description as well for anyone who wants to have a look at your stuff. But I wanted to just say thanks again, mate. That was very inspiring. Thank
you, Danny. Lovely talking to you, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And hopefully I'll see you soon. I haven't seen you in a while. The beard's come on even greater than the last time I remember seeing you.
It reminds me that I'm not so young anymore.
I had to trim mine because it was getting a bit out of control. But yeah, I've got a bit of beard envy there. All right, mate. Well, yeah, like I say, brilliant to speak to you, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, brother. I will speak to you soon.
Okay, mate.
You take care. Cheers.
Namaste. Bye-bye.
Namaste.
Bye.
Bye-bye.